Hello, I'm Paulo Rocco, and you're listening to Reprint, brought to you by the Temple News. Your in-depth look into the stories you need to know about. This week, I speak to news editor Evelyn Blower about how students felt going into the presidential debate yesterday. Then I speak to opinions editor McCaillaigh Rouse about why students should use alternative voting methods in this presidential election. So the time that we're recording this, the debate will be tomorrow, but the time that this is released, the debate was yesterday. So Trump and Kamala are coming to Philadelphia for their first presidential debate, second for Trump in this term. Evelyn, our news editor, you wrote a story about the whole event. How significant is it that they're coming to Philadelphia for this debate?
I think it's really important to emphasize that Philadelphia, especially in Old City and everything like that, that's kind of the center place of American democracy. And I talk a little bit about that in the article. I think it's important that we've never had a debate here before. All of the past debates have been in other places. The last time any kind of debate was held in Philadelphia was between Hillary Clinton and Obama. So that was back in 2012, I believe. So again, we get to have something super big in a swing state in Pennsylvania and everything like that. And I think it's really important that we get we're in a city that has a lot of like young people. So getting people that are involved and then seeing the impact of having a debate in, this city is really important. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, I've seen it in the past 2 years. I'm sure you remember maybe 2 years ago, Obama, Biden, Fetterman, what's his name, Shapiro. Mm-hmm. They were all at the Leacore Center trying to campaign for the midterms. I caught a bit of that. That was incredible. Mm-hmm. How important is this state for each candidate to win? We know it's a battleground state. How important is it, and which way do you think it's going to swing?
I think Pennsylvania, along with a lot of the other swing states, so some states around here, New Jersey, I think would be considered a swing state. Some southern states are pretty can kind of swing both ways, and I think Pennsylvania, being as we've had some really contentious elections in the last few years, really contentious midterms, where we kind of have to, where we've got metropolitan areas like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and some other smaller spaces. And those swing very democratically usually, but then sometimes we still have a lot of this right-wing support all around, and then especially in rural Pennsylvania and everything. So I think candidates have focused a lot on Philadelphia and everything like that. I've seen so many Tim Walz was around, at the Leacore Center. Mm-hmm. Kamala was at the Leacore Center. We had J.D. Vance come around to North Philadelphia. He spoke at he spoke at like something.
It was in South Philly, right?
No, it was in. He went to South Philly eventually to try a cheesesteak, which is interesting. But I think candidates have focused a lot on trying to get these the middle ground of voters, especially in Pennsylvania, to get them to swing to their side. So
for sure. You touched a little bit about it in the article. What is, from each side for both candidates, what is going to be the most important thing that they get across for themselves at the debate tomorrow?
I think the debate will focus a lot. Kamala would talk a lot about her focus on her whole thing has been kind of moving forward from, not just being Biden's vice president, but being this kind of her own voice. So I think she's trying to establish herself as her own person, establish herself with her own policies, and trying to swing a lot of these kind of middle ground voters and everything like that. Because especially with Tim Walz now from Minnesota and everything, he's very well loved over there. And obviously they're having a debate. J.D. Vance and Walz are having a debate in New York City later. Mm-hmm. But I think she's going to focus a lot on the economy and everything like that, because that's been an issue during the Biden administration. And then I feel like Trump will talk a lot about he talks a lot about his past, He talks a lot about what happened during his campaign, during his presidency. So I feel like he's going to focus a lot about that in his remarks. But the main issue that I think was talked a lot about before the debate was the mic issue.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting, that it was so highly contested that
Right.
Kamala wanted the mics to be on because she wants to fight back at Trump.
Right. Yeah. I thought it would have been the other way around, honestly.
Yeah.
It's like for Kamala to get her time, and Trump,
Yeah.
wanted to
and the whole
open his mouth.
Yeah. And the whole backstory with that was that the Biden campaign originally said, "Hey, we want our mics muted," because it just seemed to be easier that way.
Right.
Trump was like, "Sure." And then Kamala was like, "No, I think we should change it around." And Trump was kind of like, "Hey, I'm okay with the way it was originally."
Right.
But, and Kamala was like, "I want to fight back against if Trump makes these claims during the debate and everything like that."
So it's a big show of strength for her.
Yeah. I think Kamala really wants to show that she is very independent from this notion that she's been like kind of like the right-hand man for Biden, or woman, sorry. The kind of like second voice, but I think she's really trying to establish herself now that she is the candidate. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see that, yeah.
Yeah, you spoke to representatives from both Temple Democrats and Temple Republicans. What are they excited about, and what are they looking for from their respective candidates?
So Temple Democrats especially is excited to see Kamala kind of, they talk a lot about seeing her be independent from the rest of her party, or not the rest of her party, sorry, independent from her original, from her place that she's been in the last 4 years. They want to see her kind of talk about how she will fight against Trump and everything like that, and kind of, and also be more bipartisan. So I think a lot of, I don't know how to say this correctly, but trying to work better with both parties.
Yeah.
Especially Kamala has an extensive history working in government and working with everything like that. So she wants to work mostly with both parties, and I think they really want to see her kind of emphasize that relationship that she'll continue to foster. So Temple Democrats is really focused on that, and then Temple Republicans definitely wants to see Trump have a show of strength, kind of show that even though the candidates have switched and things with Biden were contentious, especially after the last debate. Yeah. They want to see him kind of be able to say, okay, there's a new candidate, and I still have this kind of strength that I can show against this new person who's, younger per se, literally younger, and kind of has a lot of regaining support and everything like that, because Kamala's popularity has incredibly shifted since she became candidate. So,
yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing I also found interesting was both organizations, Temple Democrats and Temple Republicans, are collaborating on an initiative to get students to vote.
Yeah.
How has that been? Has it been shaky?
Yeah.
Have people kept the peace over there?
So I briefly talked about this with Temple Democrats, but a lot of the times they don't want to, voter advocacy groups don't want to work solely with Temple Democrats or work solely with Temple Republicans, because one, it kind of shows this kind of favoritism, and usually all of those groups don't want to do that kind of thing. So what they've done actually is communicate a lot with each other and work with voter advocacy groups like nonprofits or any other organizations like that, and actually work together to get students to vote and get young people to vote, and get that information, get important information out. I think that was something I didn't really expect.
Yeah.
Usually opposing sides don't always work together, and it's good to see that. And I think it's important that it's the youth vote that they're focusing so much about, getting students in November, getting them to care about things. So yeah, they do communicate a lot. They work together to make sure that everyone gets all the necessary information. I'm not too sure about everything that they do together, but yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, by now, the release of this episode, you would have seen our coverage on the debate, and we'll probably release more. Now I speak to opinions editor McCaillaigh Rouse about why students should use alternative voting methods in this presidential election. Election's coming up. We just had the debate yesterday here in Philadelphia. You wrote a story encouraging students to, make a plan for how they're going to vote in this upcoming election. Can you give me a quick rundown of what that was about?
Yeah, so the plan was just kind of basically telling students that we are coming to the sprint towards Election Day. There's less than 3 months until then. So it's basically just advocating for students to go out and register to vote and kind of just choose what voting course of action they should go for. Mm-hmm. It depends on if students are out of state, because 36% of Temple students are out of state. So that means a lot of them cannot travel home. And even if they could travel home, we don't get Election Day off. So it's kind of just telling students that there are options like mail-in or absentee ballots that they can pick up and use. Yeah, for sure. I mean, for people that don't know, can you explain what absentee and mail-in ballots are and how those work? Yeah, totally. So mail-in absentee ballots are they're the same thing as if you go and ballot in person. It does the same thing. There's no difference between the two. Your vote counts no matter what. But they just allow students or whoever to vote from home. So they're just an accessible option to take home, do at your own time. There's dates that you have to turn them in by, but overall, I would say it's a really accessible option for students. They're able to think more about the candidates on the ballot, the choices that they want, what sort of issues are on the ballot and how they affect students. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Tell me a little bit about the sway and the power that college students and college age students kind of have in this election. So they actually have a huge sway. This election season, the student population, I believe, creates a 1/5 of all who are voting across the country. And they have a chance to make their voices heard. And a lot of the topics that are most debated on the ballot, like abortion access, economy, economic sort of choices, and inflation are the 3 biggest on the ballot right now. And they're also the 3 biggest for students. So that 1/5 population can really, really make an effect on what we can see for the next 4 years of the country. Yeah, for sure. This wasn't really featured in the article at all, but I'd like to get your take on it too. So from my perspective, I'm an out-of-state student. Yeah. I always vote at home. I get the mail-in ballots. My parents bring it up, whatever. Yeah. And there's a lot of conversation, I feel specifically at Temple, sometimes from the people on campus trying to recruit you to sign up to vote and stuff, to register here at Temple. Personally, I never do that because I don't feel like my voice represents this community, and I don't want to vote in this community as, sure, represent them. How should students weigh out those options, you think, of representing, voting here, kind of putting their voice here in this community, or voting back at home? So it's really up to an individual where they want to vote and if they think their vote matters here nor there. Altogether, your vote will always count. But the big difference between voting here in Pennsylvania versus voting in a different state, I'm also an out-of-state student, but I'm from Georgia. Mm-hmm. So if I was to vote out of state, I would do a mail-in ballot to Georgia because it's hard for me to get home. But I actually changed my polling location to Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. I changed it because I thought if I vote at Georgia, it's very similar to voting here. They're both swing states. And that kind of just means that the 2 states can lean either way. They can go for Republican or they can go for Democratic candidate. And so that's kind of the difference between if you change your location. The only thing I would say is that students should not feel like changing their location is the worst possible option. Right. It is all about accessibility. If you cannot vote at home, then that's okay, that you can change your location to Pennsylvania, and it's very easy. You can go online and use websites like vote.org, or like you said, around campus, there's organizations asking for you to change your location. Project 26 is one. Vote Now is another. They're both very accessible options for students to change their polling locations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, another disadvantage too, Temple's just not giving us that day off.
Yeah.
As always. I mean, what's your take on that?
I think all across the country, people should get election day off. It's a huge deal. It determines the rest of the way that the country leans for the next 4 years or beyond those 4 years. Temple should give the day off, or at least professors should consider giving students in their classes the day off if they have classes during election polling time. Overall, I feel like it would be in Temple's best interest to give that day off.
For sure, yeah. You have anything else you want to say about this story?
Not particularly, just that students have an opportunity to put in their issues on the ballot if they have something that's really been bothering them about the country or about just their lives in general. They have an ability to change that. They have an ability to put their vote out there. Just overall, every vote counts. So go to your polling location.
Thank you to our editors, Evelyn and McCaillaigh, for joining me on this episode, and make sure to check out all their work on the Temple News website. I'm Paulo Rocco, podcast editor for the Temple News, and this is Reprint.